Hey guys, it's Gwynaire here from Defy Reality Entertainment, and this evening I'm going to be doing a video on some focal blur effects. Now, this is something I'm actually doing right now within the engine. I'm actually adding these particular images, as you can see here, this particular image, into the actual engine, and it also involves creating focal blur. So basically, something that's in the foreground is sharper and the rest of it in the background is all blurred. This was something that came up in some feedback for my 2021 test build that I did last year, and it was a really cool bit of feedback that I did kind of analyze, and I looked at Riven as well, and I noticed that was also in that game where if you zoom in on a pole, for example, you can see like the plaque or the symbol, and it's a lot sharper suddenly, and the background is all kind of blurred. And I thought that's a really cool way of kind of representing important information to the player, or just kind of works nicer for like a particular visual. And so I've actually taken that on board, and I've incorporated that into the current build for Neyyah as well. And I'm actually doing a bit of that right now, so I thought I'd spontaneously this evening do a video and show you guys what I'm up to. So for this particular instance, I haven't actually added any effects to this particular scene right now, and we have what is basically like a lock. It's like a lock system that is surrounding this lever. So we've zoomed in and we see this lock. Now it looks really cool as it is. This is the raw render as well. This has no effects added to it whatsoever. This is fresh out of Blender, using Cycle's rendering engine. It basically brings the magic to this world, to be honest. It's the window into Neyyah's soul, and it brings everything to life. But Photoshop is the icing on the cake, and so we're going to basically add some effects to this. Sorry for any delays or any jam ups that we might have. I'm actually rendering something in the background at the moment, so see how we go with that. Photoshop does tend to lag a bit when there's something rendering or there's a lot of things going on in the background. So yeah, that's all good. Bear with me. So I'm just going to go to our effects for this particular scene that we're in. It's an exterior scene. We're outside. And we're just going to run through these effects and bring the scene to life. So we have our effects now added. There is a bit of exposure that I want to take away from this. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm just going to add an extra action into this particular list here for now, which I will take away, just because it's not required for any other images that go through this particular action list of effects. It's just the exposure is a bit too much, and I find this with certain action lists that I've created in Photoshop. If you apply it to all images, most of the time it's fine, but because of the lighting on certain images, when you've got like the camera's being positioned in a particular way, the effects just tend to like blow up or make something look really not actually blow up. Like the computer's fine, thank God, but just the exposure just like explodes, and it's just way too, something's not right there. So I'm just gonna, I think it's just an exposure thing, I think. So I'm just gonna try this out. Let's bring it down a bit. Yeah, that's a bit better. Gamma correction. I think that works well. Okay. Cool. Yeah, that'll be fine. So I'll just add that, and I can pretty much just select that if I wanted to, and then add it onto the image, so that's fine. So we've got basically what we've got here is like a background. This is like the background for our zoom in. And it looks great. This would be the zoom in scene. You zoom in on the lock. Now, I've also created another render. I don't know if I actually have that open. Oh, I do have an example of the other lock up here. So I rendered this out while I was away from the computer earlier today, and this will be another render to actually add into the game as well. Another scene. So for the lag there, I hope the computer doesn't jam up while I'm recording this. So this is an example of the lever and some of its components that it's attached to being masked out from the rest of the background. I also had to take off the mist effects. So this is kind of going into Blender a bit here, if it wants to work. So what I have here is the actual settings for the mist that is added in a lot of Neyyah's scenes. It basically creates the effect that things are a lot further away, and so it's basically like a mist pass that I add into Blender through the compositor, and this is added to, for two various various amounts. It's added to all the images, and it's a really cool effect. And it's added even, like, for example, for this close-up here, even though the mist won't really affect it because it starts from the distance that you want to start it from the camera within Blender. And so for like those really long distance scenes, it will start from, a fair amount forward and start to kind of get thicker as it goes along. And then within Photoshop, it kind of takes away that slightly more smoggy element and creates more of what's... I can show you an example. Possibly in a minute if I don't forget, of being in this particular scene, which is actually the scene that I'm going to be I've used for my previous video, which is Returning to the Watchtower Part 1, which goes back to like an old, I call it like an old Neyyah friend, because it was made back in 2020, and I did a showcase test build commentary on it, which is available on this channel as well if you want to watch that. But I'll also be doing Part 2, looking at recording that tomorrow. So it's actually the same scene that I'm talking about now, where if you look out through these grated windows, you can actually see the scenery in the background has that kind of slightly more faded look, and it just adds a really nice kind of quality and depth to what is essentially a 2D image, but it's making that look as real as possible, and I think that's one of the elements that makes Neyyah's artwork look so real. So basically adding the mist again creates this like weird white line thing to appear around the actual edges, which really doesn't work very nicely at all. So anything that is cut out like this kind of has to have the mist pass taken away. So I just basically take that out and we get rid of our horrible white line stuff. So now what I'm going to do for this particular lock here is actually bring in that separate image. I'm going to bring that over into Photoshop, so we have it here, and I'm also going to add the effects that we just added, so it's going to have that exposure effect added too. I will take that off though, because I don't need to add that to the other images. The weird thing about Neyyah is that it will require certain images to be edited separately, just because they've turned out in a particular way. I'm hoping this works. Yes, so thank God. Basically, it's actually the way it's done, and I'll just go back to the previous file here within Blender, is that it's basically rendering the two layers that I've got for this particular scene within Blender. So all the models that are in this scene in Blender are assigned to different layers. And so these two layers here are the layers that I want to have in the render. And over here we have the actual render that is included within the layer which is included within this render. Everything else is masked out, but it's also taking into account what is in the scene. So if I just decided to like render just this, then the lighting would look terrible. Well, it wouldn't look terrible, but it wouldn't match, for example, the rest of the scene. Like if I rendered this, obviously it's together. But if then I rendered this by itself, because of all the other things that are happening within the scene, like the water, the wood here, the metal, and because Blender renders using it's path traced rendering, it's basically simulating what the the sun does. So the sunlight's coming down, it's bouncing off different materials, and it's coming back into the camera, just as we interpret light from the sun when we're looking at anything. That's what gives Neyyah that really nice realistic look, which is again one of the reasons why I actually prefer the point and click pre-rendered style compared to real time, because it's using a completely different rendering engine. And I think even with the capabilities of Unreal Engine 4, you still have that kind of weird sort of plastic kind of tone to things that you know, you don't get at all when you're doing path trace graphics. So that's something that I really like about Cycle's rendering engine. Again, those effects are obviously working within the scene, because the scene, the lighting, it's all the same as this, but it's masking out everything except what's on that layer. So the lighting, the way it's falling, is exactly the same as this one, because it had the scene in it, but it's just graphically it's kind of taking that out, which is really cool. Again, I've taken out that white edge as well, so the mist pass has been disabled. Okay, so I have my embedded layer. So you can see there, that's the lever by itself, and that's the background. I can also take the lever out, and we've got the background. There is a slight difference in the lighting, but it's not very, yeah, it's not too bad. It's not too bad at all. So I'll take that out, put that back in, and yeah, I am now going to add the blur effect to our background layer. And I've noticed that it doesn't really need too much of it, because otherwise it starts to kind of, you know, I could go crazy with this, but I actually just like using the blur more effect a couple of times. And that for me does the trick. So you can see now everything here is in focus, but everything else is a bit more blurred, and you'll be able to see that full screen a lot more effectively. But we still have the details of the background, and it works out quite nicely. So that's a really cool example of kind of bringing to the forefront to the attention of the player what, you know, you want them to focus on as a developer, or what, you know, they should be looking at within the game. Obviously zooming in on certain small little things, this is a really cool technique that just kind of enhances the visuals a bit more. Another cool example, I'll show you guys something on here now as well. So this is an example of a recently added focal blur effect that I added to these two items here. Originally they weren't blurred, but now when you zoom in on them, the background is blurred out a bit more, and these are now at the forefront. And it was the same process of rendering out two images, then combining them together in Photoshop. So you have this really nice kind of like detailed, focused view. So this is my 2021 test build, which is really cool because it incorporated the inventory and save load options and menu and stuff for the first time. It's definitely come a long way since then, but hopefully it's not too loud either. But yeah, I just want to show you an example of the zoom in on certain objects and where the feedback came from, and how this is a really cool technique that's really going to improve that kind of thing. So here, for example, I'm zooming in on this device here that has these little dials, and it's cool. I mean, you've got the water animated in the background, which will also have to be, those frames of animation would have to be blurred out as well, because they're separate from the image. So that's a separate thing to think about. If there's water in the background, they have to be blurred out. But yeah, it would go well for this particular scene if this was maybe more in focus and the rest of it wasn't, because it then enables you to maybe focus a bit more on these symbols. I mean, you can see them in front of you anyway, but the yeah, some cool, really nice little sounds in this demo as well. And I've also improved the water since this point as well. And I really can't wait to get into sound design, because I've got some really cool, exciting ideas bubbling up in my brain of certain scenes that I think would just be so cool for like really weird, also just amazing kind of sound effects. But anyway, I'm going off topic a bit. So yeah, that's an example there of the unfocused scene. And you can see now how the two combining together, you can comparing them together, you can see that just having that bit of focal blur really adds to the scene itself, which is really cool. So yeah guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, comment if you really like this video, and check out my other devlogs as well. Got plenty of devlogs that delve into Photoshop, Visionaire Studio 5, which is the game engine that I use to create Neyyah, and Blender as well. And I really can't wait to get further into the sound design and the music composition and production as well. So there's so many jobs that I do for this game, being a solo developer of Neyyah, that it creates a whole universe of various devlogs that I can really get into. And yeah, I look forward to sharing a lot more with you along the way. And again, this is more of a spontaneous video. I didn't expect to do a video this evening on anything really, but I just thought, wow, this would be really cool to like show you guys a little element of the design process and putting it together for the game. So now I'm going to get on with the other lock and get on with all the other animation stuff and engine work that I'm doing in the background at the moment. And so yeah, definitely like, subscribe, comment, and I can't wait to share this world with you. Wishlist on Steam, and I'll catch you in the next devlog. Bye guys!